Welcome, 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 friends, to the Frontier Digital Development Forum. My name is Nick, CEO of Tech Change. We have an incredible group here in person, about 200 folks in this gorgeous venue. Hope some of you have enjoyed it. And about 750 folks online, which is great. So we're going to start with a fun series of questions as people start filtering in. You can raise your hand or you can fill out a series of polls that are online below the video feed. So Johan, let's queue up the first question. And you're pointing at me to do something. All right, I'm going to go up. First question, Johan, let's get it up. Okay, is this your first FDDF? First time? Who has been here? First time. Anybody been here before? Good, because this has never happened before. Next question. How many of you have participated in the Global Digital Development Forum? Who is there? A lot of folks, fantastic. Anybody first time did not go to GDDF but is here? A few folks, okay, fantastic. GDDF was something that we came up with, many of the organizers of this group, that when many conferences were getting canceled during the pandemic, we wanted a way to keep our community together. We launched it online. This is our first fully hybrid production. We are doing this because we really wanted a way to go deeper and demystify the frontier tech elements of digital development. All right, so let's see this. Raise your hand if you traveled the farthest to get here. Who thinks they traveled the farthest to get here? All right, let's hear it. Over here. Guatemala.
Georgia, the country.
Georgia, the country. I saw a hand over here. No?
No, I lost it. I came from Silver Spring, so.
Oh, Silver Spring. That was going to be my next question. And then online. Who is tuning in online? And do I see Thomas too? He was going to tell me. Thomas, do we have any interesting countries that you want to share while we're going here?
With folks from Moldova, Kenya, Dominican Republic, Pakistan, Kenya, and others.
Fantastic. Okay, so raise your hand if you think you traveled the shortest distance. Next question. Who walked here? Anybody walk to this venue? How close are you?
20-minute walk.
I was a 15-minute walk.
15-minute. She beat you. Anybody else?
I think I can do better. It was about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Talia, can you beat that? Oh. Now the question is, anybody online, are you tuning in from DC, maybe across the street? All right, let's do the next question. Raise your hand or comment in the chat if you speak a language spoken by, you think, the fewest number of people in the world. Who speaks a very obscure language? What do we got?
Cape Verdean Creole.
Cape Verdean Creole. What else do we have? Manisha.
I think I speak, probably nobody else speaks this language. I speak Nepali.
Okay. I can't reach you, but yell it out loudly. Nepali? Ah, two Nepali. So you all can have a really interesting conversation. Dutch?
Ik spreek een beetje Nederlands. Georgian.
Georgian, all right, great. Anybody else?
Swedish.
Swedish, okay, one more.
Italian.
Italian, anything coming in online, Thomas?
There's quite a few. Afrikaans, Dohulu, Sanskrit, and I speak...
You were trying to give the mic to me so I would pronounce them.
That's right, because I can't pronounce them. Luya, Arabic, Haitian Creole, and more.
Amazing. Okay, let's do the next question, Johan. Okay, let us do this. Where are you on the frontier tech spectrum of skepticism to enthusiasm? Raise your hand if you consider yourself a frontier tech skeptic. Okay, what about frontier tech enthusiasts? Okay, and who is in the middle, not sure, here to find out? Look at this. Quite a few folks, undecided. Well, hopefully today we will go deeper and do a number of things, if I can get my iPad to work here, to take us a bit deeper. Johan, let's go to the next slide. All right, so today is going to be full of a lot of things. We have a truly hybrid experience designed for you. We're going to have a number of conversations here in this auditorium on the main stage that will be broadcast and recorded to our virtual audience. We're trying something cool called the pop-up studio. This is like an interview booth that connects us to our virtual audience, and we'd love to have as many of you here go and join us just outside in the lobby to connect with those folks. Can you go back, Johan? We have some cool tech demos, which you'll see out in the lobby. We have delicious food catered by Immigrant Food. We have a chance to do some networking. That weigh-in is going to lead us in after lunch. And we have a museum of old tech. So Alana brought her PlayStation 1. We have a one laptop per child, lots of old phones, a chance for you to take a trip down memory lane. And then we have a fantastic happy hour hosted by our friends at Bixel afterwards. Next slide. This is a sample of the pop-up studio here. Next slide, Johan. And then I also baked 100 Halloween cookies for you. That's right. No. How many conference organizers do that? I don't think very many. So this is an opportunity for you to sample, thank you, firsthand some of the food I've got ready to go. So next slide here. So we want a huge thank you here to our sponsors, USAID, Dial, and Chemonics coming in at the platinum level, our gold sponsors, DAI, Premise, Google, and Palladium, and our silver sponsors, Save the Children. Thank you so much. And then something else we're trying, which is really exciting, we have around the world, as we are here in DC, watch parties and convenings in a number of countries. Nigeria, Argentina, Jordan, Tanzania, Kenya, Pakistan, and in the US. We have, in each of these places, people who are organizing conversations, watch parties, who will be participating and engaging throughout the 2 days. A big welcome to those who are joining. So thank you to Ivana, Marina, Sasha, Lillian, Essa, Namra, and Amundi Peter. And next slide. So a few more quick things. We have the agenda out on the lobby. There's an LED wall. There's also QR codes. You can download the app. We will be having 2 really fantastic breakout sessions at 10:30 and 1:30. Online, you will have also a series of events just for you all. Bathrooms are on the other side of this wall. And trash, please be mindful. Next slide. So we are going to also have a hashtag FDDF 2022. And I thought it'd be fun to do a selfie with the crowd before we get started. So let's do that for LinkedIn. Here we go. So everybody smile. Let's see if this works. All right. Awesome. Okay, next slide, Johan. And now I'm going to invite my colleague, Chris. Chris, where are you? To the stage from Grassroots Comedy over here. We have a very cool partnership we're trying out this year with Grassroots Comedy DC. Chris represents them, and we're going to have his team of comedians living this experience with us throughout the next 2 days, and also appropriate because we're on the heels of Thanksgiving. Sorry, Halloween. Okay, Chris, I'm going to give you the mic.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. Hey, everybody. Chris here. This is the earliest I have ever performed, so a little bit of a learning curve. I am here, as Nick just mentioned, with Grassroots Comedy. We are a group of comedians that are passionate about 2 things primarily. That is comedy and making the world a better place. For about 5.5 years, we've had many, many comedy shows for different causes in a time of need. Everything from climate change to women's rights to immigrant rights to Black Lives Matter to basically turn on the news. And if you're a progressive who's freaking out about the world, chances are we've supported a cause that's connected to your concerns. Also, comedy turns out much cheaper and healthier than Xanax. So that is where we come in. We're also trying to expand more and more outside of just having fundraiser comedy shows, again, at that intersection of comedy and making the world a better place. We have a podcast where we do a deep dive with representatives from the organizations that we support. And we are very, very close, literally any day now, to getting our tax-exempt nonprofit status so we can grow and expand and educate and engage on comedy or on the issues that are important through comedy, with the idea that it's easier to laugh than be chased by somebody in the street with a clipboard, unless that's your thing. So yeah, very happy to be here, excited to be here. I actually work in development. I was a Peace Corps volunteer myself. You're welcome for my service. Thank you. Thank you. That's right. GI problems in the desert for 2.5 years for my country. But yeah, no, I am very passionate about the reasons we're here, and this conference today, it is about technology. It is about blockchain, and I would never say that those things are boring to a crowd of people who are at a conference for those things. But I will say that we have a variety of comedians here today who are going to be in character and engaging with you all throughout the day on these topics. So I encourage you to get a little silly and be open to the idea of engaging on these topics in a silly manner, with the idea that it might allow you to go deeper. It might, in the very least, allow you to wake up a little bit when you've had too much coffee already. We have a variety of characters. You're going to meet today. Thomas Edison is here, as is the Cryptolorian. You'll find out what that means. As is a medieval peasant who is really interested in digital technology after an accidental stumble into a time portal. So there's also going to be a fellow colleague of mine, a fellow comedian, in the future, 3 seconds into the future. So anyway, there's going to be a variety of folks you're going to engage with. And thank you once again to Nick and Tech Change for the opportunity to be here. We're so excited to be a part of it. Let's have some fun. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. Really excited to have you all here. Hope you all experienced that. So we're going to do something a little different, something I've wanted to do for a while at a digital development conference. We're going to do something called a long conversation. This is a format that was developed by the Smithsonian here in DC. No slides, no moderator, no presentations, just two people for 8 minutes having a conversation in a relay format. So we have some truly amazing speakers who I'm going to invite to maybe come on stage as I am going. Come on up. Yep, come on up. The goal here is to seed some key themes and questions throughout the next 2 days. Welcome, Priya.
Hi.
And welcome, illustrious long conversationalists. Your job in the audience is to listen closely and start to thread together various aspects of these conversations and look for places to connect the dots. So here we go. We ready? All right. So Priya, we're going to dive right in. I'm going to ask you maybe first to briefly say who you are.
Hi, I'm Priya Vora. I'm Managing Director of Digital Impact Alliance.
Priya, a little known fact about you. Before USAID, before Gates, before Dial, before Global Development, you began your career at Enron.
Yes.
When we first met, I found this fascinating. A company built entirely on hype and new tech in the energy sector that came crashing down at light speed. What was that like, and how did some of those early experiences shape you?
Yeah, I never talk about this. In fact, I was embarrassed for so many years to even have it on my resume. But the truth is, I had drunk the Kool-Aid. You know, this was a company that was going to bring electricity infrastructure and broadband infrastructure to the world. I was literally choosing between the Peace Corps and Enron, and I chose Enron. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, you can question my judgment. But no, but seriously, this was an incredible place to be. brought in great talent, a huge mission, and then all of a sudden, overnight, it just went under. And what was it like? I mean, it was devastating, and it probably has left me really thinking about kind of the long-term, I don't know, the incentives of private sector, some of the shady business that goes on, a little bit of cynicism.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And just, but when it was great, it really was great. I mean, just having this huge company really take on pressing issues like energy infrastructure around the world.
I can only imagine how crazy that could have been.
Yeah.
Well, Priya, let's fast forward over the Gates years and move right to USAID. When we first met,
10 years
you were
ago.
part of a 4-person team. This was over a decade ago at USAID, charged with digital development. We have a couple folks in the audience, Chris Burns, Nandini, others who were part of those early years.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? What were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you get traction for our topics in those early days?
Well, it wasn't easy. Let me put it that way. I thought I was coming in, working for the head of the agency. We're going to modernize foreign assistance. And on one of my very first trips overseas, I had someone sit down with me in their office and say, to be honest, you're young, you're new, you work for the head of the agency, you're talking about technology and innovation. I discount you on 4 counts before you've even said a word. So the cards felt like they were stacked against us. And, I have real empathy for the organization in that there's incredible talent, there's a lot of resources, but there's no incentive to do things that are different, risky, and outside of the rule book. So it was tough. Yeah, we were. It was 1 person, no budget. The next year it was 4 people, no budget, and over time, we got to 50 plus people and a real line item in the budget. And I think the trick was, first of all, not being an engineer probably helped. I'm a development person first and foremost. So you started with Enron, you skipped the Gates years. So I really became focused on the power of financial inclusion. So having the shared goal of social and economic outcomes probably really helps as a starting point. And then using very, very limited funds, trying to put money into things like DIAL, like Better Than Cash Alliance, things that were really these kind of industry building things. Investing in tech change and saying, look, we need to upskill our workforce. These are things that don't get naturally done. And so we use very limited resources to try and build the capabilities in the industry.
I mean, it's amazing what you were able to achieve. And when you left, how big was that team?
60 people, and then maybe 20 overseas or something. Yeah.
Now there's like 4,000. How many?
Yeah,
how many,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's nice. I don't think a day goes by that we don't have like a tech and development conversation.
It's true. No, that's so exciting to hear those early stories. So you're at DIAL now. Mm-hmm. You have a big push at DIAL on what you've called kind of people-centric lens of digital development.
Yeah.
What the heck does that mean, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I would say if USAID was really around industry building, team building, and a little bit of like cheerleading, this stuff matters, I got to leave the agency, take off that cheerleader hat, and first thing we did was move to India, the team, and dragged our families with us, spent the better part of 2018 there.
Wow. And
really just start learning again about different uses of technology. And India has this incredible journey, which I won't get into. But there was one field trip in particular where we were in the south of India, and then later the team went to north of India. We're looking at how welfare payments were being made using the digital ID and different payment solutions. And it was drastically different for the people we met in the south of India. So it's the same technology, same country, same use case, And in the south of India, it was working magically. We wrote a blog called, Aadhaar Disneyland. Like, this stuff is working.
Wow.
It's really quite magical, and the transformation it means for women in particular. North of India, what it was doing was solidifying power imbalances, making corruption even
Total
more
opposite.
total opposite. And so you sit there and you think, well, I'm not going to be the cheerleader for technology, but what I really want to do, and this is what Dial's trying to do, is really surface and uncover what are the practices, what are the policies, what are the incentives that make for the magical outcome, that positive outcome on people and not the negative one. And I think we can say safely in 2022, the jury's still out. There's lots to be nervous about, and we have to be shining the light on how people are faring in the digital future.
Well, I think that's a powerful note to end on, and I see our time wrapping up. So I want to thank you for taking the time to be between our two ferns here. And I'm going to invite Afua to come to the stage. And Afua, you're now in the hot seat.
Great.
Afua, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
So Afua, you can say, introduce yourself first.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Afua Bruce. I consult with organizations who are funding or developing responsible technology. And I'm also the co-author of the book, The Tech That Comes Next.
So responsible technology, that's your focus area. And maybe you could start with a story. Just give us an example or an experience that really solidified for you the importance of responsible tech.
Absolutely. There are many examples I could point to, some that I worked on successfully and some unsuccessfully, but one of the stories that I often go back to is from one of my very first projects from my time at the FBI, which was my first experience working on technology outside of the private sector. And I had worked on this technology and process solution for a while. It had been blessed by the senior executive who was in charge of the criminal investigative division, to the point where he'd had a big meeting where he declared, like, this was going to solve so many problems for agents and intelligence analysts working together. And so I was feeling pretty proud of myself as I walked back to my office and I sat down, and then this agent just walks into my office uninvited and just looks at me and says, if your solutions work, missions will fail. And I don't know if you've ever just looked across the table from an agent who is upset, who is armed, because agents always have their guns on them.
Sounds a little scary.
Who's telling you that missions are going to fail because of your work. But as, after I got past rethinking some of my life decisions that got me there to that point and engaged her in the conversation, really realized that I had missed taking enough time to really understand and respect the work that would be done on the ground and how the agents would need to interact with the technology and how the intelligence analysts would need to work with each other. And so that's really helped guide the work that I do in frontier tech and development tech and responsible tech, is really how are we partnering with and really respecting the expertise of lived experience and of the people who will actually be using and be affected by the technology.
So in that case, it was a valid concern she was raising.
Yes, absolutely valid concerns.
Yeah. Okay, so having to really focus on the end outcomes and the usage, right?
That's correct. I think a lot of times people can get trapped in this idea of techno-solutionism. Obviously, no one who's sitting here today, but perhaps we have heard of others getting wrapped up in this idea of techno-solutionism and the idea that if you're a technologist, if you're an engineer, if you're a data scientist, that because you have been successful in one area, you automatically know what will be successful in other areas. You automatically know every use case, and if the technology doesn't work for someone, it's clearly an operator error and not a design flaw. But instead, it's really important to spend the time learning the local context, wherever that is, spend the time recognizing that the idea is on the ground, how people actually use the technology, how people's lives will be affected, how their work will be affected, can actually be benefited, not complicated, not changed for the worse, or otherwise have negative impacts on their lives. It's really important to invest that time understanding the systems and the culture before you work on even designing and implementing the technology solution.
So elaborate on this a little bit more and tell us how you both identify and stave off the techno-solutionism and when to be skeptical.
Absolutely. You know, I recently was talking with one of my clients, and they were giving me an example of how their development team, which was US-based, had worked on a product for a long time for an organization that would be using this product in an African country. And they deployed it, and it didn't work. They were shocked that the adoption hadn't been at the rates at which they had anticipated. And when I started to push as to, well, what kind of testing was done, what kind of involvement was done from the start, it revealed that although there had been initial conversations about the culture, or there had been initial conversations about specific features, and there had been some testing, there hadn't been enough involvement from the start. And so when we think in that case, actually, you can run into issues just as simple as language. And the way that English is used when English is not someone's first language, you need to make sure that idioms are not used as much, not used at all. You need to make sure the language is plain and that it can be understood. And even that simple communication barrier, just the simple words and placement of different of the language that was in that specific product really contributed it to being inaccessible for some of the people who were going to be using that technology.
Yeah. So you are a computer engineer, you're a woman of color.
These things are all true, yes.
I mean, I can't imagine the path to getting where you are was just easy breezy, smooth sailing. I was hoping maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your personal journey and how your leadership style has evolved, probably being one of the few, if not the only, in many of your classrooms or boardrooms or meeting rooms.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to work at the White House. I ran the National Science and Technology Council for a couple years under the Obama administration. I attended an event at the White House where there was a screening of the movie Hidden Figures, if you remember that movie. And one of the leading actresses in the movie, we're sitting in the White House room where the screening was done. She just said afterwards, can you imagine being the only Black woman and having the answer to this strong technical problem, but no one looking at you? And I just remember thinking, I can actually. That was literally this morning. I was in a room with senior leaders from across the government about science and technology and national security, and that was my life. I was the only woman in the room. I was the only person of color, and it was my meeting, and I was asked to take out the trash by one of the guests that were there. Wow. So it was like, I can actually. It's my life, story of my life. But, I think one of the things a couple of the things that I've found really important is one, I'm so grateful to my parents who nurtured a strong love of technology and science in me from a young age, whether or not I wanted it at different points in time. I'm super grateful to mentors of multiple genders and races throughout my career. I think the importance of mentorship and sponsorship cannot be understated, and the importance of creating space and really speaking life and identity over people who come from historically overlooked and historically underrepresented and historically marginalized communities is incredibly important. And that ability to create space for others, that ability to encourage others, is something I think we all share, regardless of where we are, and is a power that we should all take advantage of.
I don't think there's any better way to end. It's so nice to meet you, Afua. Thank you.
So nice to meet you. Thank you. Wendy Taylor.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Let's start by you introducing yourself.
All right, well, hi everyone, great to be here. I am Wendy Taylor. I'm a Vice President of Technical Leadership and Innovation at JPIGA. We're a nonprofit working all over the world in global health, but I've spent much of my career working both on the donor side and the implementation side.
Absolutely. And because of all of the places where you have worked on the donor side and implementation side when it comes to frontier tech, I'm just wondering, have you personally experienced any skepticism with respect to frontier tech and advanced analytics?
None, not at all.
Oh, good. We're done.
No, sadly, actually, I think it feels like it's every day. But, it's such an important question, and I'm so glad that we even have this prompt to think about it. I mean, I've spent my career figuring out how do we accelerate the delivery of cutting-edge technologies, medicines, innovations to low and middle-income countries, and to do it in real time, not in 10, 15, 20 years when it finally those benefits of those technologies trickle their way down to those communities. Like, how do we do this in real time? And a lot of what I've done is try to think about, how do we address those market challenges? How do we make markets work? But I think we have to do a lot more kind of internal introspection, even within our own sector, and looking at the skepticism. And so I'm sure all of us who are tech enthusiasts have seen it every day. I saw it as a donor when I was trying to push a bold innovation agenda in an agency that is spending a lot of time and a lot of resources investing in addressing today's problems with yesterday's tools, and trying to kind of see the opportunity of investing in new innovations. And sometimes you get kind of forced into this equation of people thinking about you have to invest in saving lives today versus investing in new innovations that may or may not solve these problems down the road. And that's a false equation. We, of course, have to do both and create space for both. There's no better champion for that than Alex Deegan over here. But there is skepticism. There is a lack of risk appetite. And it's often, I think, it's a constant challenge, a struggle every day. But I also saw this in I worked with donors. And so this is a little story. It was 2019. I worked with a number of donors where I was trying to get donors to modernize our global epidemic intelligence systems so we could prepare for a future outbreak, future pandemic. Again, this was 2019. I think we all know how 2020 played out. But I saw this huge potential of investing in outbreak analytics so we could detect outbreaks faster, respond with more precision, even predict outbreaks down to micro levels where they will occur before they occur, and even prevent outbreaks. But getting people to wrap their arms around big data and advanced analytics and what that really means and how to make that possible is a hard sell. And I have to say, even it's hard to get anyone to invest in global health security when you're not in the middle of a pandemic, period. But trying to get those new technologies in use is hard. So I've seen the skepticism and the challenges at every level.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you've seen and successfully confronted skepticism and challenges at every level. And just want to pick up on a couple of things you mentioned, the false dichotomy between having to invest in saving lives or invest in innovation, and then really getting people behind and getting them able to understand advanced analytics. And so when you think about working with whole organizations, how do you address that skepticism within organizations where you work? How do you really build an appetite for embracing technological change in organizations?
Yeah, well, I think this could be a long, long conversation.
I'm sure.
But maybe I'll just put out two ideas that are top of mind for me. One is around the value proposition. And of course, you have to have the right solution for the right problems, first and foremost. But even how we communicate that value proposition is so important. So I'll go back to my example of really trying to modernize our global epidemic intelligence systems. Trying to get people talk about outbreak analytics, talk about data, and using data to get better insights in new ways. I found that when you're talking amongst the people that get it, like everyone sees the value, but outside of that, when people are not working in those spaces, they don't work with AI, they don't really see the potential, they don't understand it, their eyes glaze over. Data, you're like, you lose them in the first two sentences. And so finding ways to be able to paint that picture, bring it back down to, here are the users, here's what they have now, here, like, make it real, here's the problem they're facing, the tools they have are inadequate, here's how these new tools can help them do their jobs better, here are the questions they need to answer. Really kind of visualize that. I think we need to continue to do a better job and make that leap. And then the second example I'll give is really around that proof point and de-risking. You know, that is no surprise to anyone. We need to de-risk these cutting-edge ideas. But even an example within my own organization, I'll mention a partnership we have with Proximy that I think is here today, and they're even doing a demo later today. But cutting-edge, Silicon Valley darling, bringing virtual reality into surgical theaters across the world. And we saw the potential, they saw the potential to bring that technology also to low resource settings, some of the kind of really challenged, resource challenged, environmentally challenged surgical theaters, and bringing virtual reality so that surgeons could scrub in from anywhere. So really cool idea, but couldn't really get donors to come in and invest to be able to develop that proof of principle. And putting my old donor hat on, I think I would have been skeptical too. I mean, it almost is like a bridge too far, and it's hard to suspend that disbelief. So we ended up having to, as partners, co-invest ourselves and get that proof point. So we had to be willing to kind of put the money in up front, put the skin in the game, even because probably the risk-taking donors, it was still a little bit too much. So sometimes when we're on that true frontier, we have to take those extra steps.
Absolutely. De-risking the space, incredibly important. And as someone who has seen eyes glaze over as I talk about data and technology, I'm certainly taking notes from what you said. My final question for you, though, is just about the challenges facing the space. So can you talk to me a little bit about what challenges you do see facing frontier tech? Yeah, well, I would say it's scale. And I think one of the things that I learned from investing over $150 million in global health innovations when I was on the donor side is that often the technology, the innovation, that's actually the easy part. And the scale part is really hard. And I think we don't invest enough in it. We always seem to underestimate how hard it actually is. We need to be thinking about it from the beginning. You really become user obsessed, understand everything about the end users, the markets from the very beginning. But as we think about scaling, we have to create those pathways to scale. We have to understand demand, supply challenges. We have to understand the entire ecosystem, because sometimes you may be able to figure out one piece of it and how to bring a product to market. But there's a whole lot of other barriers along an entire value chain that you may get hung up, and that really prevents scale. So that's where I think we really need to put a lot more attention, a lot more investment. Understand the ecosystem to successfully scale. Wendy Taylor, thank you so much. It's such a delight talking to you, and I will let the next person come on up.
Yeah, thank you so much.
My way around the fern.
Jamie, come have the hot seat.
Thanks.
All right, so why don't you introduce yourself to all our friends here in the audience?
Sure. I'm Jamie Butcher. I'm president and CEO of Cobonics International. We're a 47-year-old organization, employee-owned, working in about 95 countries, around 5,000 teammates around the world.
Excellent. Well, so you get the same question I had,
Okay.
Which is around appetite for embracing technological change. How do you actually think about building that, teaching that, embedding that in whether it's your own organization, whether it's donors, whether other players? This is a big challenge.
I think it's a big challenge. Let's face it, a lot of the current challenges we face in the world, the coming crises, I don't know anything but technology that's going to allow us to address what we're facing just as humans around the world in coming years. And yet there's this dichotomy that exists, that it's not the technology that's going to solve the problem. It's the ability to get that technology into the hands of people that are actually using it for good. And I think like Priya mentioned, the use cases can be the same thing. And we've seen over the last couple of decades working in financial inclusion, for instance, starting in the Philippines, that the same technology can be used in a wide variety of ways. And the use cases are different depending on how we engage in the communities that we're working with. And that's not just the Philippines, it's all over the world. Currently working on rural finance. In Colombia, it's the same thing. We were introducing some digital mobile money transfer products, and there was a skepticism that I think is right. I think it's the right thing for people to be skeptical of new ideas that are being pushed towards them. And really, I think it's a matter of finding the right honest brokers. And we haven't talked about this yet, but it's that trust factor.
Yeah.
How do you build the trust in the communities that we're serving to adopt the technologies that can better serve them and their families and their community members? And what I think we do is what we found over the last couple of decades is that it's really about finding the right institutions and organizations and people in those communities to really build that trust and bridge that gap. I mean, moving to a different area, we are working with drone technology and transferring blood samples to labs so people would know their HIV status. And I mean, there's probably nothing more personal than that. And so working with community health workers and really explaining what we're doing and taking the time at the outset to build that trust from the beginning that this technology is there to help, and then the outcomes will be, in your benefit, I think has really been key to the adoption of these new ways of doing work that, to your point, can scale and solve problems, not just in one place or another, but across millions and tens of millions of people that need that kind of assistance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The trust, you need to build the demand. Everything, context is everything, and getting all the way down to the local level, so important. Well, let me shift gears, because I love this question, because I'm in an organization, we do some of our in-house innovation, but we also do a lot of partnering, like I mentioned, our partnership with Proximy. How do you deal with ownership when it comes to digital, especially frontier tech, whether you're doing in-house innovation or even partnering? How do you think about that?
So this is maybe the most exciting thing to me to discuss, because trust is just the basic foundation. If we look at what we can do now, we're able to create so much better connectivity and transfer responsibility and authority to our colleagues around the world like never before. And that's really our goal as a leadership team at Chemonics, is we want to put the authority and responsibility in the hands of people working in the communities that we're serving, and technology is enabling that. I think about a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, Peter, who I met in 2011 in Western Kenya. And we were doing something there where we were delivering most of the ARVs around Kenya at the time. And we did something that was very non-technological. We had all of our teams go out and meet with the public health workers and the medical staff and just ask how we're doing and take a notepad and pencil. Over the years now, that's turned into mobile apps, real-time connectivity. And we've been able to hand Peter the responsibility and authority to make decisions on the fly as he's engaging and encountering different problems. From there, what I'm hoping we can do is use distributed ledgers and technology to transfer ownership, giving Peter and people like him and the people we work with the opportunity to earn money and to take ownership of the work that we do in a very scaled way. I think of things like NFTs. How many images do we all use every day of people around the world in our work, right? We try to put people forward in our work in their best light, and yet we're not giving them any sort of ownership other than a release that we can use their image. What if we embedded NFTs into those images and allowed for transfer of ownership back to the people that we're using to represent everything we do? Things like that, I think, are really exciting and represent the opportunity to really create that distributed ownership and authority that we're looking for, I think, all of us in all of our work.
Yeah, so let's talk about ownership and maybe go back to some of this digital tech you're working on, these apps. So what are So you're talking about potentially transferring those over to communities, maybe transferring ownership, transferring IP. What are the barriers to doing that, and how have you been overcoming those?
So a use case that's interesting to me that illustrates some of the barriers is refugees and internally displaced people. Over 100 million people in the world. 1 out of every 80 has been displaced and forced out of their homes. And when we go to the refugee camps or IDP camps, what you realize is it's not just your physical assets, you lose your identity. You lose access to be able to explain who you are, what you've earned, and the ability then to carry forward your career and other things. And so I think some of the barriers are us. Our programs are fragmented, right? And they come at people in those circumstances.
When you say us, is it the big us, like the global we, all of the donors?
We, right?
Okay.
Everybody trying to help.
Yeah, okay.
And I find that if we can flip that, and we've begun experimenting with different use cases and prototypes of, can we put ownership back into the hands of those displaced people so that they can own the sort of experience that they have building back their identity? And can we support every individual in a scaled way on that distributed ledger in a way that leaves them with the ownership, so it doesn't matter if they're working with Chemonics or USAID or the UN or whomever to rebuild and get back what they've lost. I think that's the promise of technology. Now, get back to what we talked about at the beginning. We have to work in ways that are user-driven and building that trust along the way. But I think that that's the biggest barrier I see, is our ability to really work together to transfer that ownership.
Yeah, well, it's a good problem to figure out how to solve. All right, well, our 10 minutes, 8 minutes is up, but yeah, thank you.
Great. Welcome in,
Moving
Mark.
on. All right.
So welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Why don't you start with introducing yourself?
Well, let me just take a couple of minutes, since I'm the oldest one in the room. I think I deserve a little more time. So, for today, there's a few things you need to know about me. I'm a 64-year-old digital white guy who grew up on a tobacco farm and fixing cars in North Carolina. I married an African woman and have 2 biracial kids who have created a new lens for me to view the world. I left the farm for Swaziland in the Peace Corps when I was 21. And 40 of these last 43 years, I've worked in 35 countries. In all those countries, I've had 2 successful development experiences. The rest have been varying degrees of failure. I define success by meeting the expectations of the have-nots, not meeting the metrics of the haves. Why? By some estimates, there are 700 million more people worse off than before COVID. So for me, the risks of the status quo are far greater than the risks of change. The successes I had taught me that, 1, markets need to reach the people, not the other way around. 2, making money off the poor is not good business. 3, human-centered design has to be carried out with the humans. And 4, expanding opportunities for meaningful work for everyone is the greatest challenge of our time.
It's going to be hard to build on, but let's riff on that intro. Talking about those 700 million people that are worse off than they were before the pandemic. What, in your long history and career of working overseas, what are some of the more inspiring and promising technologies you've witnessed to address that issue?
So let me just caveat that with, so I work in USAID. I'm a deputy assistant administrator. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I oversee the former Global Development Lab. I still like that name, and as well as all of the localization work of USAID. And, you know, I think one of the things that we really have got to get ourselves into a space for technology is I'm a firm believer that we need 21st century solutions to 21st century problems. And I remember watching TV one day and someone saying, you know, the thing that people don't understand about the virtual world is that it is now part of the real world. And so that understanding that really is an insight into the fact that technology does need to become the solution that we need to have. So for me, those 21st century solutions mean that we need leapfrogging as a modus operandi. We don't need it as something that hopefully will get there. We really need it, and I wish this conference was not called digital development. I wish it was called digital disruption, because I really do think we need that kind of an effort.
Yeah, let's do that. Real time.
And so I think there are many examples out there. All the examples that you all presented are really compelling examples. The issue is I think we need more of them more often. And, you know, in USAID, I usually tell people that we are a regulatory agency. If it's not mandatory, we don't do it. And so that's why things for that Priya mentioned, that others mentioned in terms of USAID being a forward-leaning organization, until we make digital the default, which we're trying to do right now in terms of solutions, I think that's we're not going to get there as fast as we should. I really want us to get us into a space where we are working at the pace of change in the world, and I don't think we're there yet. So right now I would say that we're in digital development is more leaning towards digital decline, in the sense that we're not keeping up because we're not willing to take those risks and really try to move things in a better direction.
So you've spent most of your career outside of the agency. Now you're inside of the agency as a donor. What kind of lessons are you bringing, and how do you take those lessons then and apply them through that donor lens in order to foster this future, this 21st century technology future you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that the lab has pushed and that our administrator is pushing, she's pushing the whole idea of progress, not just programs. I would say that for me, one of the biggest lessons I've had before I worked for aid in the private sector and otherwise is that it's also progress, not just profits. And I think one of the big challenges we have in the digital space is people get in, they generate an innovation, and then of course they want to milk it and maximize their profits. And I understand that, but then where's that sweet spot, just like for progress and programs, where is that sweet spot with profits? And I think we really have to do some soul searching. I'll give you an example. I set up a coffee exporting business in Nicaragua during the Sandinista regime. And it was wildly successful. We were the first ones to work in the fair trade coffee market with Max Havelaar in Europe, and were the first to export. We were paying farmers $100 a bag when the gate price was $30 a bag. And so farmers were bringing in their coffee, but we were having to give them 80% of it back because it wasn't quality. And so we helped them do all these things to improve the quality. And then instead of us just sort of maximizing our profits, we made it an owner. We shared the ownership. We passed the ownership to the farmers, set up a third-tier co-op, and that co-op started in 1991 and is still operating today.
That's incredible. And so when you think then about the risk-taking that's involved in ventures like that, how do you view risk from the standpoint of a donor and running the lab, and how do you, getting back to what Wendy said, de-risk some of these more creative ideas where failure may happen and yet we need to try in order to succeed?
Well, I mean, risk in an agency like USAID is shaped by congressional legislation. And I think the world has changed enough, but yet we're still using the same foreign acquisition regulations from the 70s. And so, I think there's a lot of things that need to change. On the assistance side of things, that's acquisition, but on the assistance side of things, there are huge opportunities. In many respects, we are our own worst enemy. We set up the rules for ourselves. We can change a lot of those rules. And I think we really have to go through some soul searching and find new ways to do business. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we think is required is that when we put out a solicitation, that everyone has to write down and give us a written proposal. Actually, that's not that way at all. We can actually do oral proposal discussions and make decisions based on videos or tapes of those discussions.
Perfect.
And so that could really accelerate the pace of change in terms of us being more experimental and taking more risks, and instead of us thinking that we have a 5-year solution. And so the cycles we have for learning, I usually tell people, look, for me, 21st century solutions to 21st century problems requires radically applying 3 development principles. One is, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, there's a word for that and expect a different result. We don't want to be in the insanity space. We need to keep ourselves rigorously looking for change and rigorously looking for answers that are going to think outside the box. And number 2, the knowledge, skills, and abilities we had to get us to where we are aren't the ones we're going to need to get us to where we want to go. We have to keep learning. And lastly, how we do business is just as important as what we do. And so innovation is something we've got to make part of what we do all the time.
Great way to wrap up our portion of the digital disruption conversation we're having and continue on with the next guest. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Speaking of a digital disruptor, Alex, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, I'm Alex Dagan. I'm a lemur biologist, and I run and founded a company called Conservation X Labs, which is an innovation and tech company that works in the field of conservation.
So one of the questions Alex wanted me to ask, which I'm going to ask, is what are fighting words for you in international development in tech?
So the word I really hate actually is appropriate technology, because in many of the ways where I think it's been used, there's a bias that we have when we use that word. We're making assumptions as to the capabilities of the individuals that we're dealing with. And instead of giving them those digital tools or those technologies that they need, we assume that we need to actually give them the most basic things. And one of the things I've just seen, like when Myanmar came online and during sort of the interregnum of peace and growth that we had, we saw digital technologies and smartphones go from 5% to 95% penetration. When I went into Iraq in 2003 and my job was to rebuild science in that country, they had 20 years of sanctions. Every university library had been looted or damaged in some ways. And someone suggested that we should actually use digital libraries. And so we were able to provide every university in Iraq with the equivalent of a US digital library, and just the usage rates immediately, the thirst that was there, even though they had never been exposed to this, that under Saddam they had limited cases for using the internet. It was incredible what they were capable of and what they had. And we make these assumptions about people all the time.
So talk a little bit about that in the context of Conservation X Labs. I'm really fascinated by this whole issue of figuring out how to address the underlying drivers of extinction. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to, the first thing I want to say is design as part of the process, but it's the same design process that we use to build an iPhone, right? That we're applying. We should treat people in that way. So a lot of our work is actually thinking about how do we take frontier tech, incredible innovations, and make it accessible to as many people as possible, right? So it's not the idea of deciding what tech they can use, but really designing it for the use cases. This is kind of one of our key devices, which is called the Nabbit. And it has the ability of giving you a PCR quality test in 9 minutes at less than 1 copy of RNA. PCR quality, but at the speed and the scale and the accessibility of your lateral flow tests, right? And it works for any DNA, any RNA, any protein, and it's designed to be rugged. It works in high humidity. You don't need to be literate to actually be able to use it. The instructions take you, they're graphical instructions that take you through the test. And in fact, it's cheap enough that we can almost give away the devices and just base it on the tests themselves. But that is the device. We have hundreds, tens of millions of TB cases that go undiagnosed every year because people can't go into a clinic. They can't go into a place that has continuous power. The Gene Expert, which is one of the major devices that Gates and HHS has funded, doesn't work where it's dusty. That doesn't help us, right? And so how do we actually design this technology? How do we how do we give a 21st century solution to a 21st century problem that goes to the front? But I think part of that process is design thinking, which is sort of observation, and also value proposition testing, which is science, right? Let's actually make sure we understand it. One of the other solutions we thought about, which was a failure, was pangolins. Pangolins are 20% of global wildlife trade. We believe that they're at the nexus of horseshoe bats of the
illegal trade.
Illegal trade of the COVID-19 crisis. That's what was implicated in Wuhan. And we were like, can we create a synthetic scale that has the same biosimilar properties of natural scale? And we could. We could actually, pangolin scales do have a medicinal effect. We could create that scale, make it look exactly like that. But we went to traditional Chinese medicine physicians, hospitals, regulators in China, in Chinese, and interviewed, tens to almost 100 people over time. And what they said is actually the natural property of the scale was so important that they would rather have keratin that was used from another animal rather than something that was biologically exactly the same thing. That was the thing that was really important to them. And it was understanding of why that worked and why it didn't work that was critical to us being successful.
So what are some of the other things you're working on now?
The thing I'm kind of most excited about is dealing with this problem with neglected diagnostics. And one of the things that happened is we started building this for conservation, wildlife trafficking, species identification, we still are. But one of our use cases was fish traceability. And we also did that value proposition. 30% of your fish is not what you think it is. If you buy red snapper, 90% of the time you're not getting red snapper. And that's a big target because FDA describes red snapper as 12 different species. So we thought this is the thing we need, right? 95% of U.S. seafood's imported, 1% is inspected. How do we empower people to be able to solve it? What we found is no one in the restaurants actually wanted to know that, right? And so the actual buyers didn't want to know the truth, and we were like, okay, that's a market signal. That's really useful. But one of the other things is we just realized we couldn't build the diagnostic test for every single thing that we wanted, that we wish we could. Right? And that there's this model in pharma, which they're going to pick the most profitable thing underneath the curve, which is why no one's making diagnostics for the things that you care about. And so we said, how do we actually open up, democratize the process of building diagnostics? And we said, there's this great model. I love the PlayStation. Some people love the Xbox. Maybe you're a Nintendo person, whatever. But this model is Sony, which owns the PlayStation, makes 5% of the games. 95% of the games for the PlayStation come from someone else, from another game designer. Same thing with Xbox, same thing with Nintendo, same thing for the App Store on the Apple computer. And we said, if we could create the equivalent of a software development kit that allows people to port games on this platform and do this for molecular science, that could actually democratize the ability of allowing all these labs around the world to unlock what they've developed in academia and develop it for the front lines. And that's what we're trying to do right now, is this idea of an MDK.
So you were also chief scientist at USAID. So, I mean, just in conclusion, what do you see as some of the big challenges for the development space in terms of moving things forward in the digital world?
Man, I mean, I would literally just take your conversation that happened right before I got on there and just those are them. That was you and I
We click.
Yeah, we click. I think that's right. But I think I think there's two things in addition I'd put. What Wendy said about de-risking technology in scale is so important, right? And I think that is one of those things, blended finance, the opportunities to actually get investors come into this space so we can think about progress, and programs and progress, not just profits, I think would be really important. I think the second one is, where does government actually get in the way? Where does government actually destroy markets rather than help markets? And that's something we need to be aware of, those inadvertent effects that we can actually create by being clumsy and not actually be out there because humans are in the middle of everything.
Incredibly insightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. After you.
Zoe.
Hey there.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you because I think you're in a really interesting space and your background's amazing. But could you tell us who you are?
Well, I am not a lemur biologist. I work at a company called Google, and we, among other things, we make a search engine.
I've heard of that. I might have used it a couple of times.
Yeah.
That is pretty good. So, you've worked at Google, you've worked at Facebook. Have you ever heard of any skepticism about technology?
Yeah, I have, once or twice. But actually, you know what? I'll give you another example, more in line with what I originally did. So I started my career working in violence prevention, gang violence prevention. And we had these great evidence-based tools. We thought, let's use a programming language called R to do social network analysis and figure out who are the most at risk of committing violent crime or being the victim of violent crime, because often those populations overlap. And so we thought that using technology would be great here to identify those who are both most at risk of being victimized or victimizing someone else. And I think in tech, we talk a lot about FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I think that at the time, there was so much FUD around the way that the police would use this list, and so it got spun into a hot list of folks that would be surveilled and then necessarily, arrested and things like that, instead of what it was originally intended to be, which is a way to identify resources to the people who really needed them most, not necessarily for incarceration and things like that. So I think that's a great example of something that was really well intended, but because of the skepticism around how communities, especially communities of color, had been policed for so long, it really it became actually much more controversial than we expected.
How do you avoid those inadvertent effects? How do you think about it? How do you try to estimate what they are?
That's a really good question. I think at a place like Google, we really do a lot of user testing. And so I think, when you're switching gears and now talking about product development, there's no way that you can just have an idea and roll it out and just expect that everything is going to go okay. And that's, we have thousands of people working on search. And so each launch, each idea, our VP says, do we just let every product manager, every engineer just have a great idea and launch it? And the answer is no. And so I think having a really strong process, strong launch evaluation process, is a great way to figure out, are there unintended consequences? Are we rolling out something that gives a better answer for these queries but gives a worse experience for these other queries? And so that's something that we built into our process. And then on launches that require some expertise that we don't necessarily have within Google, we do kind of consult with experts outside of a technology company.
I want to talk about one thing you're doing now, which I literally see at the nexus of our democracy. You've had this, I love looking up your background. You've had this amazing career across the UN working on rule of law. Mm-hmm. You helped Facebook stand up the Facebook Oversight Board. And at Google, you're senior manager for content and trust.
Yeah.
What, just given the news that some of you guys might have heard, there was a tech company taken over by some guy. what has been your lessons from those experiences, given the role of technology and human security? And what's going on in Twitter?
I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what's going on in Twitter, but what I can say is that the industry at large is really coming to terms with the fact that content moderation at scale is essentially a deeply human issue. It's a deeply human problem. And so while we have incredible tools and advances in machine learning classifiers, hash matching technology to be able to find like the worst of the worst, ultimately, how do you teach a machine to determine what's political speech, what's hate speech, you know, what's terrorist speech, what's political speech? Those types of things, they're very difficult to teach, you know, a machine how to recognize the differences between those things. And so so I think that's kind of what everyone's grappling with right now within industry, is on the one hand, we've created these amazing products, these amazing services that have given access to information to billions of people at a scale unprecedented, you know, hard to really kind of envision. But on the other hand, you know, we're really also talking about what's acceptable speech online for those same billions of people. So that I think is probably a conversation that's being had at Twitter, if I had to guess.
My guess. And let me follow up with that. What is the role of tech in justice and democracy? How can it help us?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing I would say about throughout my career is that people organize themselves in all sorts of different ways. So when I originally worked in violence prevention, we saw kind of a shift in group violence in terms of switching from very hierarchical structures to more kind of net-centric structures. And then in UN peacekeeping, what we really saw was conflict was created because people had maybe some imposed borders placed on them that were supposed to be defining whether you are Liberian or Sierra Leonean or Bissau Guinean, right? And that was not necessarily the way that people naturally wanted to organize themselves. And I think with tech, what we're seeing is another pressure on the way that people form networks, communicate with each other. It's not necessarily based on borders. It's not necessarily based on political ideology. But, you know, for me, you know, I feel as deeply connected to some of my subreddits that I subscribe to as like being an American or a Chicagoan or those types of things. So I think that's what's really interesting throughout all of those different experiences. Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear you're a Chicagoan, represent for Chicago. Let me ask. Let's say you have unlimited resources. What's the innovation or product you would want to build before you die?
Before I die, I mean, well, speaking of Twitter, I'd love an edit button. I would be really happy to be the product manager for the edit button on Twitter. But I think also deep down inside, you know, as someone who grew up only seeing Asian people on TV and Star Trek, I have a lot of ideas of what I would want to build from that. And it's a toss-up between the holodeck and the replicator. But I think in terms of something that would be useful for us is, for those of us who kind of have worked a lot in the field and that sort of thing, I'd love a simultaneous interpretation device, you know, that's wearable and that would facilitate easier communication when we're out, you know, working with IDPs or working with refugees, things like that.
That would help us cross those borders and those boundaries incredibly well. I am so happy you are at Google and doing the work that you do.
Thanks.
I think it's so important right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Can we give another round of applause for this amazing long conversation panel? Thank you to all of you who participated in this and who listened. I want to hear as we wrap and online what kinds of takeaways you had. For me, a lot of great conversations around failure, de-risking, FUD, inadvertent effects of tech, scale, scale, scale. Also, I think I caught a synthetic part of your talk. 30% of fish is not what you think it is, but no one wants to know. And Mark, I think you said it's okay now to submit proposals orally and by video. So, all right, friends, one more time. Thank you so much. You are now released for break. We will start again at 10:30. So, see you back here at 10:30.